What happens to a princess when she is sent away? She is married to a foreign prince, a stranger in a strange land, often before she is old enough to understand the maps her life is drawn upon. Her letters home are read by spies. Her ladies in waiting report her every word. Who can she trust? What if her only true ally is a sister, hundreds of miles away, who understands the gilded cage because she lives in one just like it? Why do we tell stories of sisters who were rivals, like Mary and Elizabeth, but forget the ones who were lifelines? What power did two queens hold when they wrote to each other in a private code, sharing secrets their husbands and ministers could never know? Could a whispered piece of advice from one sister to another, sent by secret courier, alter the course of a treaty or prevent a war? We look for power in crowns and armies. Maybe the real unseen power was in the ink and parchment that flowed between sisters who refused to forget each other. Number 19, what does loyalty look like at the end of the world? The four daughters of the last Tsar of Russia shared a bedroom their entire lives. They did not have separate rooms, even as young women. They were so close that the two older sisters, Olga and Tatiana, were known as the big pair, while the younger two, Maria and Anastasia, were the little pair. They signed their letters with a collective nickname, Atma, using the first letter of each of their names. In a world of imperial formality, this was an act of simple, unbreakable unity. They earned Red Cross diplomas together during the First World War, nursing horrifically wounded soldiers in a converted palace hospital at Tsarskoye Selo. They did not shy away from the work. They changed bandages, cleaned wounds, and sat with dying men, offering a quiet presence that was more valuable than their titles. The bond between Olga and Tatiana was the core of the family's strength. Olga, the eldest, was thoughtful, sometimes moody, with a deep sense of responsibility. She read a lot and had a quick mind. Tatiana was the practical one, the organizer. She was poised and beautiful, often called the governess by her sisters because she naturally took charge. When their mother, Serena Alexandra, retreated into her own world of anxiety and mysticism, it was Tatiana who would step in. She would manage the household, deal with petitions, and act as a buffer between her mother and the outside world. Olga supported her completely. There was no jealousy. Olga was happy to let Tatiana lead in public. Their alliance was one of complementary skills. Tatiana would organize the charity bazaars or hospital schedules, and Olga would be there, her steady, quiet presence, a pillar of support. They operated as a single unit. When they nursed soldiers, Tatiana was the one who was more administratively skilled, while Olga provided the deeper emotional comfort. Soldiers remembered Olga's empathy and Tatiana's efficiency. This sisterhood was not just a personal comfort, it had a public function. During the war, as the monarchy's popularity crumbled, the sight of the Grand Duchesses working as nurses was a powerful piece of public relations. It was meant to show the Romanovs were connected to their people's suffering. The sisters' genuine dedication was plain to see. They were not playing a role. Their shared work was a manifestation of their shared duty. They understood their position required them to serve, and they chose to do it together. Their alliance became most critical in their final months. After the revolution, during their imprisonment in Tobolsk and then Ekaterinburg, their unity was all they had left. Stripped of their titles, their jewels, and their freedom, they relied on each other for everything. Witnesses from the household who were in prison with them noted how the sisters never complained. They took care of their younger brother, Alexei, who was very ill. They tried to keep a routine. Tatiana would organize their meager daily tasks, while Olga would try to read to the family or find moments of peace. They protected each other from the guards' cruelty and from the despair that threatened to consume them. Their bond was a silent, powerful resistance against the dehumanization they faced every day. They had lived as a unit, and they would face their end as one. Their story is not one of shaping Europe through treaties or marriages, but of shaping their own small, collapsing world through an alliance of love and duty that never broke, even at the very end. Number 18, can letters hold empires together? A telegram sent from England to Russia in 1894 contained a simple, heartbreaking message. My misery is great. It was from Alexandra, Princess of Wales, to her sister Dagmar, the Empress of Russia. Dagmar's husband, Tsar Alexander III, was dead. Alexandra's first thought was for her sister. She immediately traveled to Russia to be by her side, an unheard of journey for a royal of her stature at the time. Their reunion was not one of a princess and an empress. It was just two sisters, Alix and Minnie, as they called each other, holding on to each other in grief. This journey was the physical expression of a lifelong alliance that connected the two most powerful empires of the age, Britain and Russia. Alexandra, Princess of Wales later, Queen of the United Kingdom, and Dagmar, who became Empress Maria Feodorovna of Russia, were daughters of King Christian IX of Denmark. Denmark was a small country, but Christian was called the father-in-law of Europe for a reason. He married his children into the great royal houses. Alix and Minnie were exceptionally close from childhood. They were married a few years apart. Alix to the future King Edward VII of Britain, and Minnie to the future Tsar Alexander III of Russia. They were now at the center of two vast and often rival empires. Their sisterly alliance was maintained through a constant stream of letters. They wrote to each other for over 50 years. Thousands of these letters survive. They wrote in English, sharing everything. They talked about their children, their health, their difficult husbands, and the suffocating formality of court life. But they also talked about politics. Their correspondence formed a private, informal diplomatic channel between London and St. Petersburg. They offered each other advice and intelligence that their governments did not have. Minnie, in Russia, often felt isolated. She was a Danish princess in a deeply conservative and sometimes hostile Russian court. Her letters to Alix were a lifeline. Alix, in Britain, faced her own challenges with her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria, and the rigid expectations of the British monarchy. They understood each other's frustrations in a way no one else could. Their shared Danish heritage was a constant bond. They often reminisced about their childhood in Copenhagen, a simpler time before they became imperial chess pieces. Their alliance had real political weight. They shared a deep distrust of Prussia, which had attacked their home country of Denmark in 1864. This shared anti-Prussian sentiment influenced the private views of the British and Russian royal families for a generation. When politicians and diplomats were trying to build bridges with Germany, the two sisters were a constant, quiet force, reminding their husbands and sons of Prussia's aggression. This personal feeling had a subtle but persistent effect on the complex web of European alliances. They also coordinated their families' lives. They arranged visits, holidays, and gatherings, turning the royal families of Europe into a single, sprawling clan. The annual family gatherings in Denmark brought together the rulers of Britain, Russia, Greece, and Denmark. These were not just family holidays, they were informal political summits where relationships were built and tensions were eased. Alix and Minnie were the architects of this cousinhood diplomacy, and their support for each other was absolute. When the Russian Revolution overthrew Minnie's son, Tsar Nicholas II, Alix was frantic with worry. She and her husband, now King George V, pushed for the British government to offer the Russian imperial family asylum. The political situation made it impossible, a decision that haunted the British royals. But the first instinct was driven by that sisterly bond. Even after Minnie escaped Russia, her connection with Alix remained her anchor. Their letters, which once held empires in conversation, now became a source of personal comfort in a world that had been shattered. Their alliance shows that the most enduring power is not always found in treaties, but in the unwavering loyalty between two sisters separated by geography, but united by love. Number 17, when two sisters try to change an empire. In 1858, Queen Victoria's eldest daughter, Vicky, married the heir to the Prussian throne. She was just 17. She was brilliant, liberal, and raised to believe in constitutional monarchy. She arrived in Berlin full of hope, ready to help her husband modernize the deeply conservative, militaristic state of Prussia. She was immediately met with suspicion and hostility. The Prussian court saw her as a foreign meddler. They called her the Englishwoman. She was desperately lonely. Her most crucial lifeline was her younger sister, Alice, who was still back in England. Vicky and Alice were the two brightest of Victoria's daughters. They shared a passion for learning, art, and progressive ideas, all nurtured by their father, Prince Albert. Their letters to each other were not just filled with family gossip. They were serious discussions about philosophy, politics, and social reform. When Alice also married a German prince, Louis of Hesse, and moved to Darmstadt. Their alliance became a small liberal outpost in the heart of a Germany that was rapidly unifying under Prussia's authoritarian rule. Their plan, inherited from their father, was to export the British model of a constitutional monarchy to Germany. They believed a unified Germany could be a force for peace and progress in Europe, but only if it was liberal and democratic, not autocratic and military focused. Vicky, as the future Empress of Germany, was in the most powerful position. Alice, in the smaller state of Hesse, was her key supporter and confidante. They used their correspondence to share strategies, vent frustrations, and keep their liberal dream alive. Their letters reveal the depth of their political partnership. Vicky would write about her struggles against the powerful Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian chancellor who despised her liberal views. She detailed his political maneuvers and her attempts to influence her husband, Crown Prince Frederick. Alice would write back with advice, sympathy, and news from her own corner of Germany. She acted as Vicky's eyes and ears in the other German states. Together, they tried to build a network of like-minded people within the German aristocracy. Their work was not just theoretical. Alice, with Vicky's encouragement, became a pioneer of social work in Hesse. She was deeply influenced by Florence Nightingale, whom she met through her sister. Alice founded hospitals, charities for the poor, and organizations to improve women's education and sanitation. She put their shared progressive ideals into practice. Vicky tried to do the same in Berlin, championing education for women and promoting the arts and sciences, but her efforts were constantly blocked by the conservative establishment. The sisters' alliance was a source of immense personal comfort. They supported each other through tragedy. When Alice's young son, Frit, died in a tragic accident, Vicky was her greatest comfort. When Vicky's son, Sigismund, died, Alice rushed to her side. They understood the unique pressures of being a foreign princess in a German court, the constant scrutiny, and the political isolation. Their letters were a safe space where they could be themselves, two intelligent women trying to make a difference in a world that was resistant to their ideas. Ultimately, their grand project failed. Vicky's husband became emperor for only 99 days before dying of cancer. Bismarck's vision of a Germany of blood and iron triumphed over their vision of a liberal parliamentary Germany. Alice herself died young, from diphtheria, at the age of 35. But their alliance was not for nothing. They planted seeds of liberalism and social responsibility in Germany that would take generations to grow. They proved that women could be serious political thinkers and actors, even when the system was designed to exclude them. Their story is a powerful reminder that even failed revolutions can leave a lasting legacy. It was a partnership of two sisters who, for a brief moment, dared to believe they could change the course of an empire. Number 16, Can a Sister's Warning Save a Queen? In the late 1770s, Queen Marie Antoinette of France was living in a fantasy world. Her life at the Palace of Versailles was a whirlwind of extravagant parties, high-stakes gambling, and theatrical performances. She was shedding the stiff etiquette of the French court, but she was also isolating herself from the reality of her country, which was sliding towards bankruptcy and revolution. Hundreds of miles away, in Naples, her older sister Maria Carolina was watching with growing alarm. Maria Carolina, Queen of Naples and Sicily, was a shrewd and ruthless political operator. She knew the game of power, and she could see that her younger sister was playing it very, very badly. Maria Carolina and Marie Antoinette were daughters of the formidable Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. Their mother had raised them for one purpose, to be instruments of Austrian foreign policy. They were married off to the Bourbon kings of France and Naples to cement an alliance between the Habsburgs and the Bourbons. Maria Theresa instructed them to write to her every week, and after her death, the sisters continued this habit. Their letters formed a direct line between the courts of Paris and Naples. Their alliance was one of opposites. Marie Antoinette was charming but frivolous and politically naive. Maria Carolina was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply involved in the governance of her kingdom. She effectively ruled Naples alongside her weak husband, King Ferdinand IV. She had learned from their mother that a queen's duty was to secure power for her dynasty. She tried, through her letters, to teach this lesson to her sister. As the situation in France grew more dangerous in the 1780s, Maria Carolina's letters became more urgent. She begged Marie Antoinette to take her role more seriously. She warned her against her circle of decadent friends. She advised her to build a better relationship with her husband, King Louis XVI, and to try to win the love of the French people. "You must not meddle in government affairs," she once wrote, "but you should know what is going on." She was trying to mold her sister into a capable political partner. Marie Antoinette often ignored the advice. She found her sister's letters bossy and interfering. She did not understand the danger she was in. But as the French Revolution began in 1789, she started to realize her sister was right. The letters between Paris and Naples became a lifeline. They wrote in code, smuggled by secret messengers, to avoid their letters being intercepted by revolutionaries. And Maria Carolina became Marie Antoinette's main political advisor and her only true confidante. Maria Carolina, from her position in Naples, tried to orchestrate an international response to save the French monarchy. She used her influence with the other courts of Europe, lobbying for military intervention. She sent her sister money and strategic advice. She helped plan the royal family's failed escape attempt, the Flight to Varennes. It was a frantic, long-distance effort by one sister to save another from the guillotine. The alliance was ultimately tragic. Marie Antoinette could not escape her fate. When news of her sister's execution reached Naples in 1793, Maria Carolina was consumed by grief and a desire for revenge. She turned Naples into a center of counter-revolutionary activity. Her hatred of the French Revolution would shape the politics of southern Italy for the next 2 decades. The story of Maria Carolina and Marie Antoinette is a dark example of a sisterly alliance in a time of crisis. It was a relationship forged by a domineering mother, tested by distance and different personalities, and ultimately solidified by a revolution. Maria Carolina's warnings could not save the Queen of France, but her efforts show the incredible lengths one royal sister would go to for another. It was an alliance that operated in the shadows, a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of history with ink and coded messages. Number 15. What is the price of a sister's favor? At the court of Empress Maria Theresa in Vienna, there was one daughter who could do no wrong. Archduchess Maria Christina, known as Mimi, was her mother's undeniable favorite. She was beautiful, charming, and talented. Maria Theresa broke all her own rules for Mimi. While her other daughters were married off for political reasons to foreign princes they had never met, Mimi was allowed to marry for love. She chose Prince Albert of Saxony, a man with little land or power. It was a scandal. To make the marriage possible, the Empress made them joint governors of the Austrian Netherlands, and later gave them the vast Duchy of Teschen, making them incredibly wealthy. This favoritism created a deep rift between Mimi and her many sisters. One sister felt the sting of this inequality more than any other, Maria Amalia. She was strong-willed and passionate, and she had also fallen in love. But she was denied the same privilege as Mimi. Instead, she was forced into a political marriage with the Duke of Parma. She never forgave her mother, and she never forgave her sister. The relationship between Maria Christina and Maria Amalia became a bitter feud that lasted their entire lives. Their story is not an Unsung alliance, but its opposite. It is a cautionary tale of how a parent's preference can turn sisters into lifelong enemies and how that enmity can have political consequences. Their sisterhood, or lack thereof, shaped the internal politics of the Habsburg family and the courts of Parma and Brussels. In Vienna, Maria Christina wielded immense influence. Her closeness to the Empress meant she had a voice in political appointments, military commands, and even foreign policy. Her siblings knew that the quickest way to get something from their mother was to go through Mimi. This created a court full of intrigue and resentment. Mimi and her husband, Albert, used their position to build up a magnificent art collection, which would later form the basis of the Albertina Museum in Vienna. They lived a life of culture and luxury, funded by the Empress's favor. Meanwhile, in Parma, Maria Amalia was miserable. She hated her husband and the small provincial court. She defied court etiquette and took lovers, causing scandals that horrified her mother in Vienna. Her letters home were full of complaints and demands for more money. She saw Mimi's perfect life as a constant reproach. She did everything she could to annoy her mother and undermine her sister. She became a political thorn in Maria Theresa's side, refusing to follow instructions and making unauthorized overtures to Austria's rival, Spain. The rivalry between the two sisters was fought through letters and proxies. They complained about each other constantly in their correspondence with their mother and other siblings. When they had to meet in person at family gatherings, the tension was palpable. Courtiers would report on their icy interactions. The feud did not end with Maria Theresa's death. When their brother Joseph II became emperor, he disliked Mimi's influence and sided with Maria Amalia, stripping Mimi of some of her power. But when he died, their other brother Leopold II restored Mimi to favor. The sisters' fortunes rose and fell depending on who was on the throne. This broken sisterhood had a lasting impact. It destabilized the Habsburg family's internal dynamics. The constant infighting distracted from more important matters of state. It also created a permanent source of diplomatic friction between Vienna and Parma. Maria Amalia's rebellious court in Parma was a constant annoyance to the Austrian government. The story of Maria Cristina and Maria Amalia is a powerful example of how personal relationships at the highest level of power can have wide-reaching consequences. Theirs was not an alliance, but an anti-alliance, a bond broken by jealousy. It demonstrates that for every story of sisterly support, there is another of rivalry, and that these personal feelings, when they involve queens and archduchesses, are never just private matters. They become affairs of state. Number 14, how do you rule a kingdom from the sidelines? For nearly 40 years, the real power behind the French throne was not a minister or a mistress, but a group of sisters. They were the unmarried daughters of King Louis XV, Adelaide, Victoire, and Sophie. A fourth sister, Louise, left them to become a Carmelite nun, but remained part of their network. Known collectively as Mesdames, they formed a formidable political bloc within the Palace of Versailles. They never married because suitable Catholic princes were scarce, and their father was reluctant to let them go. So they stayed, and they watched, and they schemed. Their alliance was born of shared circumstance. As unmarried princesses in a court that valued women only for their marriage prospects, they were in an awkward position. They could have faded into obscurity. Instead, they banded together. They created their own court within the larger court, a center of social and political life. Adelaide was the leader. She was intelligent, proud, and deeply conservative. Victoire was good-natured and followed Adelaide's lead. Sophie was shy and retiring, but she was a loyal member of the group. You know, their primary goal was to protect what they saw as the traditional values of the monarchy and the Catholic Church. They were a deeply religious and conservative faction. Their main enemy was their father's series of powerful mistresses, particularly Madame de Pompadour and later Madame du Barry. They saw these women as immoral usurpers who held undue influence over the king and the government. The sisters waged a constant, subtle war against them. They used social snubs, cutting remarks, and their influence with their father to try to undermine their rivals. Their alliance was their strength. Individually, they could be dismissed. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. They controlled a significant portion of the court's social life. To be invited to their apartments was a sign of favor. To be excluded was a political death sentence. They used this social power to reward their allies and punish their enemies. They gathered information from their network of ladies in waiting and sympathetic courtiers, becoming one of the best informed groups at Versailles. When their nephew Louis XVI came to the throne, their influence grew. The new king was young and indecisive. He looked to his aunts for guidance. They advised him on ministerial appointments and matters of policy. They were instrumental in the dismissal of a progressive minister, Turgot, whose economic reforms they opposed. They consistently pushed the king in a more conservative traditionalist direction. Their influence contributed to the monarchy's resistance to reform in the years leading up to the revolution. Their alliance also extended to their niece by marriage, Marie Antoinette. At first, they were suspicious of the young Austrian archduchess, but over time they saw her as a potential ally in their conservative cause. They tried to guide her, though their relationship was often difficult. The sisters' power was entirely informal. They held no official titles or positions in government. Their influence came from their royal blood, their proximity to the king, and, most importantly, their unbreakable unity. They thought, acted, and schemed as one. They were a family firm dedicated to a political cause. As the French Revolution approached, they became symbols of the old regime's excesses and intransigence. Their conservative politics were completely out of step with the changing times. In 1791, as the situation in Paris became increasingly dangerous, Adelaide and Victoire fled France. Their departure was a major political event, seen as a betrayal by the revolutionaries. They spent their final years in exile in Italy, dying just before the turn of the century. The story of the Mesdemes is a unique example of a sisterly alliance. They were not queens in their own right, but they wielded a queen's influence. They turned their shared status as unmarried princesses from a weakness into a strength, forming a political party of three that shaped French politics for a generation. They show that power is not always found on the throne itself, but sometimes in the rooms next to it. On number 13, Can You Be a Queen and a Philosopher? Wilhelmine of Prussia was one of the most intelligent princesses of her era. She was a gifted musician, composer, and writer. She loved philosophy and corresponded with Voltaire. She was also the favorite sister of the man who would become Frederick the Great of Prussia. Their childhood was brutal. Their father, King Frederick William I, was a violent tyrant who despised their love of the arts and learning. He would beat them, humiliate them, and threaten them. Their only refuge was each other. They formed an intense intellectual bond that would last their entire lives. Their shared suffering created an unbreakable alliance. They developed a secret language and a private correspondence to communicate safely. They promised each other they would never be separated. This promise was broken when they were forced into political marriages. Frederick was married to a German princess he disliked. Wilhelmine was married off to the obscure Frederick, Margrave of Brandenburg-Bayreuth. She was devastated. She had hoped for a brilliant match with the Prince of Wales. In England, instead, she was sent to a tiny provincial German court. It could have been the end of her story. Instead, it was the beginning of her real influence. From her small court in Bayreuth, Wilhelmine created one of the most vibrant cultural centers in Germany. She used her intelligence and her Prussian connections to transform Bayreuth from a backwater into a capital of the arts. She designed and built the stunning Margravial Opera House, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. She brought architects, artists, and musicians to her court. She turned her personal exile into a cultural triumph. Her alliance with her brother Frederick continued through a constant stream of letters. After he became King of Prussia, their correspondence became a vital political and personal lifeline. Frederick was often away on military campaigns, expanding Prussia into a major European power. Wilhelmine was his most trusted confidante. He valued her intelligence and her judgment. He discussed his military strategies, his political plans, and his philosophical ideas with her. Her letters were his connection to a world of culture and ideas beyond the battlefield. Wilhelmine also acted as Frederick's diplomat. Her court in Bayreuth became a useful listening post. She gathered intelligence from the other German states and passed it on to her brother. She hosted important visitors and used her charm and intelligence to promote Prussian interests. During the 7 Years' War, when Prussia was fighting for its survival against a coalition of great powers, Wilhelmine undertook a secret diplomatic mission on her brother's behalf. She traveled to meet with representatives of the French court to try to negotiate a separate peace. The mission was dangerous and ultimately unsuccessful, but it shows the incredible trust Frederick placed in his sister. He was willing to put the fate of his kingdom in her hands. Their relationship was not just political. They supported each other through personal crises. They shared a cynical, witty view of the world forged in their traumatic childhood. Their letters are full of sharp observations, gossip, and philosophical reflections. When Wilhelmine died in 1758, Frederick was devastated. He wrote that he had lost the one person in the world who truly understood him. He built the new palace at Sanssouci in her memory. The alliance between Wilhelmine and Frederick the Great is a powerful example of an intellectual partnership between a brother and sister. Wilhelmine was more than just a supportive sibling. She was an intellectual equal, a trusted advisor, and a capable diplomat. She used her position not just to survive, but to create a lasting cultural legacy. Her story shows that a small marriage did not have to mean a small life. From the sidelines of European power, she and her brother shaped the cultural and political landscape of their time. Number 12. How do you govern an empire by post? Philip II of Spain ruled a global empire from a small, dark office in his palace of El Escorial. He was a micromanager, obsessed with paperwork and detail. He trusted very few people. Two of his most important and trusted agents were his own daughters, Isabella Clara Eugenia and Catalina Michaela. He was unusually close to them, especially after the death of their mother. He personally supervised their education and kept them by his side, training them in the business of government. This shared upbringing created a powerful bond between the two sisters. They were raised at the very center of Spanish power, and they understood how it worked. Their alliance was not just one of affection, it was a professional partnership forged by their father. He prepared them to be rulers, not just royal brides. When the time came for them to marry, Philip did not send them far. He married Catalina to the Duke of Savoy, a strategic territory on the border of France and Italy. He married Isabella to her cousin Archduke Albert of Austria, and in an unprecedented move, he made them joint sovereigns of the Spanish Netherlands. This was a critical and rebellious part of his empire. He was not just marrying his daughter off, he was delegating a huge part of his authority to her. The sisters were now in key positions to help their father and brother Philip III, who succeeded his father, run the Spanish Empire. Their lifelong alliance became a vital part of the Habsburg family's political network. Their correspondence was, in effect, a state intelligence service. Catalina, from her court in Turin, would report on French political maneuvers and the complex politics of the Italian states. Isabella, from Brussels, would report on the situation in the rebellious Netherlands and the political currents in England and the German states. Their letters were not just gossip. They were detailed political reports. They analyzed events, offered advice, and requested instructions. They had been trained by their father to observe and report accurately. They knew what information was important. This flow of information between Turin, Brussels, and Madrid gave the Spanish monarchy a significant advantage. They had trusted agents in crucial locations who could provide reliable intelligence that their ambassadors could not. And Isabella, in particular, became a formidable ruler in her own right. She and her husband Albert governed the Spanish Netherlands for over 20 years. They were skillful politicians and diplomats who managed to bring a period of peace and stability to the region after decades of war. This period is known as the Truce of 12 Years. Isabella was a key negotiator of this truce. She was a patron of the arts, and her court in Brussels became a major cultural center. The painter Peter Paul Rubens was her court painter. Catalina also played a crucial role in Savoy. She was a popular and effective duchess who managed the court and the state's finances with great skill. She was a major influence on her husband and ensured that the Duchy of Savoy remained a loyal ally of Spain. The two sisters supported each other personally as well. They exchanged portraits, gifts, and letters about their children. They were separated by a great distance, but their shared experience of being Habsburg women in positions of power kept them close. They understood the pressures and responsibilities they each faced. The alliance of Isabella Clara Eugenia and Catalina Michaela is a remarkable example of how princesses could be trained and deployed as effective political agents. They were not passive pawns in their father's dynastic games. They were active participants in the governance of an empire. Their story shows a different model of female power, one based on administrative skill, political intelligence, and an unbreakable sisterly bond that served the interests of their dynasty for a generation. Number 11. Can a Tudor rose bloom in Scotland? The Tudor sisters, Margaret and Mary, were born to be political pawns. Their father, Henry VII, used them to secure his fragile dynasty. Margaret was married to King James IV of Scotland to seal a peace treaty between the two old enemies. Mary was married first to the aging King Louis XX of France, and then, in a defiant act of love, to Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, a close friend of her brother, King Henry VIII. They lived lives of high drama, separated by politics and geography. Yet, through it all, they maintained a bond of sisterly affection and support that was rare in the treacherous world of the Tudor court. Their alliance was forged in their shared, unusual childhood. They were princesses of a new dynasty, constantly aware of their precarious position. Their early life was dominated by the political calculations of their father and grandmother, Margaret Beaufort. This shared experience gave them a deep understanding of each other's situations. When Margaret became Queen of Scotland, she was just 13. She was in a foreign, often hostile court. Her letters to her father, and later to her brother Henry, are full of requests for money, advice, and emotional support. She relied on her family connection to England to bolster her position in Scotland. Mary, back in England, was her advocate at court. She would remind their brother of his duty to their sister. The relationship became more complex after their brother Henry V came to the throne. Henry's aggressive foreign policy often put him at odds with Scotland. Margaret was caught in the middle. She was the Queen of Scotland, but she was also a Tudor princess. Her loyalty was constantly tested. In 1513, her husband James IV was killed at the Battle of Flodden, fighting against an English army. Margaret was now a widow, and the regent for her infant son, King James v. Her, position was incredibly dangerous. The Scottish lords were suspicious of her English blood. During this period, her connection to her sister Mary was a crucial source of comfort. Mary understood the pressures of being a royal woman in a man's world. After her own brief, unhappy marriage to the King of France, Mary had defied her brother by secretly marrying Charles Brandon. This could have meant treason. But she and Margaret supported each other's unconventional choices. They were two women trying to navigate the demands of dynastic duty and personal desire. Their correspondence shows a deep affection. They called each other my dearest and best beloved sister. They exchanged gifts and news about their children. This personal bond had political implications. It helped to keep a line of communication open between England and Scotland, even when the two countries were on the verge of war. Margaret consistently tried to foster peace between her son's kingdom and her brother's. She saw herself as a bridge between the two nations, and her sister in England supported this role. Their alliance was not always smooth. They were rivals for their brother's affection and financial support. There were periods of jealousy and misunderstanding, but they always came back to each other. They were the only two people in the world who truly understood the unique circumstances of their lives. The legacy of their alliance was profound. It was Margaret's line that would eventually unite the crowns of England and Scotland. Her great-grandson, James VI of Scotland, became James I of England after the death of the childless Elizabeth I. The sisterly bond between Margaret and Mary, which helped to maintain a connection between the two countries through turbulent times, played a small but significant part in paving the way for the creation of Great Britain. Their story shows how personal relationships between royal women could have consequences that lasted for centuries. Number 10, how do two sisters build a kingdom? In the early 13th century, France was the rising power in Europe. Its king, Philip Augustus, was a brilliant and ruthless strategist. One of his greatest assets was not an army or a castle, but a woman, his daughter-in-law, Blanche of Castile. Blanche was married to the heir, Louis V. She was intelligent, pious, and politically gifted. She was also part of a powerful sisterly alliance that would shape the politics of Western Europe for a generation. Her older sister Berengaria was the Queen of Castile. Blanche and Berengaria were the daughters of King Alfonso VE of Castile and Eleanor of England, who was herself the daughter of the famous Eleanor of Aquitaine. They were raised in a politically sophisticated court and learned from a young age how power worked. Their grandmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, personally traveled to Castile to choose which of them would marry the French heir. She chose the younger sister, Blanche. This decision would change the course of French history. The alliance between Blanche and Berengaria was based on a shared understanding of their duty and a deep mutual respect. They were both regents for their young sons, and they faced similar challenges. They had to fight off rebellious nobles who wanted to seize power for themselves. They used their correspondence to share advice, strategies, and support. Blanche's moment came when her husband, Louis VE, died in 1226, leaving her as regent for her 12-year-old son, the future Saint Louis IX. The French barons immediately revolted, thinking they could easily depose a foreign woman and a child king. They underestimated Blanche. She proved to be a masterful politician. She moved quickly to have her son crowned. She built alliances with loyal nobles. She faced down the rebels with incredible courage. at one point appearing with her son before the loyal citizens of Paris to rally their support. She ruled France with an iron fist for nearly a decade, crushing the baronial revolts and consolidating royal power. In Castile, Berengaria faced a similar situation. She had briefly been queen in her own right, but had abdicated in favor of her son, Ferdinand III. However, she remained the true power behind the throne. She was a shrewd political operator who guided her son, managed the kingdom's finances, and arranged strategic marriages. She was the architect of the final union of the kingdoms of Castile and Leon, a major step in the Christian reconquest of Spain. The two sisters, ruling as regents in France and Castile, effectively coordinated their foreign policies. They maintained a strong alliance between their two kingdoms. This Franco-Castilian alliance was a major stabilizing force in European politics. It acted as a counterweight to the power of England and the Holy Roman Empire. The sisters ensured that their kingdoms supported each other diplomatically and militarily. Their communication was vital. They would have used messengers to carry letters back and forth, discussing the political situations in their respective countries. A problem with a rebellious count in the south of France might be solved with advice from Berengaria, who had dealt with a similar problem in Castile. A marriage negotiation for one of their children would have been planned and coordinated between them. The success of their sons was their shared legacy. Both Louis IX of France and Ferdinand III of Castile became two of the most successful and revered kings of the Middle Ages. They are both saints in the Catholic Church. Their success was built on the foundation of stability and power that their mothers had created for them. Blanche and Berengaria show the incredible power that royal women could wield in the medieval period. They were not just placeholders for their sons, they were rulers in their own right. Their sisterly alliance was a partnership of two of the most capable politicians of their time, a bond that secured two kingdoms and shaped an era. Number 9, what was life like in the Gilded Cage? King George III and Queen Charlotte of the United Kingdom had 15 children. 9 were boys and 6 were girls. The 6 princesses, Charlotte, Augusta, Elizabeth, Mary, Sophia, and Amelia, grew up in a strange, isolated world. Their lives were controlled by a strict routine and the increasingly erratic behavior of their father. They were highly educated and accomplished, but they were not allowed to marry. The king could not bear the thought of them leaving home. The queen was reluctant to let them go. The result was that the princesses were trapped in a state of permanent childhood, living at home well into their 30s and 40s. They called their home the nunnery. To survive this gilded cage, the 6 sisters formed an incredibly close alliance. They called themselves the sisterhood. Their bond was their primary source of emotional support and their main defense against the suffocating restrictions of their lives. They developed their own private world with its own language, jokes, and routines. Their alliance was structured and organized. The older sisters, Charlotte, the Princess Royal, and Augusta, were the leaders. They looked out for their younger siblings and often acted as intermediaries with their parents. They shared everything: clothes, money, and secrets. Their letters to each other and to their brothers reveal a world of deep affection, frustration, and quiet rebellion. Life in the nunnery was monotonous. Their days were filled with lessons, walks, and formal dinners with their parents. They had very little contact with the outside world. Their only escape was through correspondence. They wrote constantly, not just to each other when they were separated, but to friends and relatives across Europe. These letters were their window to a world they could not join. The sisters' alliance was not just for emotional support, it was a practical necessity. They had to navigate the complex and often frightening world of their father's mental illness. During his episodes of madness, the court was a terrifying place. The princesses had to rely on each other to cope with his unpredictable behavior and to protect their mother. They presented a united front to the court and the politicians who were trying to take advantage of the king's illness. They also used their unity to engage in small acts of rebellion. They secretly read novels that were forbidden to them. They managed to carry on clandestine flirtations and, in some cases, secret relationships. Princess Sophia had an illegitimate child, a secret that the sisters kept for her entire life. This was the ultimate act of sisterly loyalty, protecting her from a scandal that would have destroyed her. Eventually, some of the princesses did manage to escape. The Princess Royal was married to the Duke of Württemberg. Her letters back home to her sisters are filled with a mix of newfound freedom and homesickness. Princess Mary married her cousin, the Duke of Gloucester, late in life. Princess Elizabeth also found a late marriage to a German prince, but even after they married and left home, their primary emotional connection remained with the sisterhood. The alliance of George III's daughters is a poignant story of survival. They were women of intelligence and spirit who were denied the normal experiences of life. They were princesses without a role. They responded not with bitterness or rivalry, but by creating a powerful and loving community among themselves. Their story provides a rare glimpse into the private lives of royal women and the ways they found to exercise agency and find happiness in a system that was designed to control them. Their bond was not a political alliance that shaped treaties, but a personal one that allowed them to endure an extraordinary and difficult life. Number 8, how do you build a legacy in someone else's shadow? And Queen Victoria's daughters were all raised with a powerful sense of duty, but they were also raised in the shadow of their brilliant older sister Vicky and their beloved sister Alice. Princess Helena and Princess Louise, the third and fourth daughters, had to find their own ways to make a mark. They were less intellectual than Vicky and less maternal than Alice, but they were practical, artistic, and determined. They formed a quiet but effective alliance, supporting each other as they carved out unique roles for themselves within the royal family and British public life. Helena, known as Lenchen, was the most dutiful of the sisters. She was plain, sensible, and deeply loyal to her mother. After her father's death, she became Queen Victoria's unofficial secretary and companion. This was a difficult and demanding role. She married a minor German prince, Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, who was much older than she was. In an unusual arrangement, Victoria insisted that the couple live in England so that Helena could remain close to her. And Louise was the opposite. She was the rebel of the family. She was beautiful, artistic, and fiercely independent. She was a talented sculptor and a supporter of the early feminist movement. She chafed under the restrictions of court life and longed for a life of greater freedom and purpose. Victoria, recognizing her daughter's unconventional nature, agreed to let her marry a subject rather than a foreign prince. Louise married the Marquis of Lorne, the heir to the Duke of Argyll, one of Scotland's most powerful noblemen. The two sisters, the dutiful one and the rebellious one, might seem like an odd pair, but they were incredibly close. They shared a down-to-earth sense of humor and a pragmatic approach to life. Their alliance was based on mutual support for their very different paths. Helena admired Louise's talent and courage. Louise relied on Helena's steady presence and common sense. Their partnership found its most public expression in their shared commitment to public service. They were pioneers in defining the role of a modern princess. They understood that the monarchy needed to be seen as useful to the people. Helena was a tireless worker for charity. She was one of the founding members of the British Red Cross and was deeply involved in promoting nursing education and healthcare. She was not glamorous, but she was a relentless organizer and fundraiser. She gave her name and her time to dozens of organizations. Louise used her artistic talents and her social position to support the arts and education. As the wife of the Governor General of Canada, she made a huge impact on the cultural life of the young country. She helped to found the National Gallery of Canada and the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts. She was more glamorous and socially adept than Helena, and she used these skills to promote her causes. They often worked together. They would be patrons of the same charities and would attend public events in support of each other's projects. They understood that their combined presence had a greater impact. Their letters show them coordinating their schedules and discussing their various charitable activities. They were a professional team. Their alliance also provided personal support. They lived through the long, oppressive years of their mother's widowhood. They both had to deal with the Queen's demands and her melancholia. They supported each other through family illnesses and deaths. Louise's marriage was not always happy, and Helena's life was marked by the ill health of her husband and children. They found solace in their sisterly bond. The story of Helena and Louise is about finding purpose in the middle. They were not destined to be empresses or great beauties. They were the working princesses. Their quiet, effective alliance allowed them to build significant legacies in the fields of healthcare, nursing, and the arts. They helped to redefine what a princess could be, moving the role away from purely dynastic function and towards a model of public service that continues in the British royal family to this day. Number 7 were the daughters of Spain, cursed or consecrated. And Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the famous Catholic monarchs, forged the modern state of Spain. They had one son who died young, and 4 daughters who survived to adulthood: Isabella, Juana, Maria, and Catherine. These 4 princesses were raised with an intense sense of religious piety and dynastic duty. Their parents' grand strategy was to use their daughters' marriages to encircle their main rival, France. The 4 sisters were sent to Portugal, the Holy Roman Empire, and England to create a web of anti-French alliances. The alliance between these 4 sisters was forged in a childhood of intense religious devotion and political education. They were pawns, but they were highly educated pawns. They knew what was expected of them. Their duty was to God and to Spain. Their shared upbringing created a powerful bond, but their adult lives would be marked by separation and tragedy. Their story raises a question: were they consecrated to a holy cause or cursed to lives of sorrow for the sake of their parents' ambition? Isabella, the eldest, was married to the heir of Portugal. Her goal was to unite the Iberian Peninsula. She was deeply religious and took her role seriously. After her first husband died, she was married to his successor, King Manuel I of Portugal. She died giving birth to their son, Miguel, who for a brief time was the heir to the thrones of Spain and Portugal. Maria was then sent to take her dead sister's place. She married her brother-in-law, King Manuel I, and became Queen of Portugal. She had many children and secured the alliance that her sister had begun. Her relationship with her remaining sisters was maintained through letters, a constant reminder of the family strategy they were all a part of. Catherine of Aragon is the most famous of the sisters. She was sent to England to marry Arthur, the Prince of Wales. After his early death, she was famously married to his younger brother, King Henry VE. For over 20 years, she was a popular and respected Queen of England. She was a loyal daughter of Spain and a devoted wife. Her letters to her father and her sisters show her constant awareness of her role in the grand family project. She saw herself as an ambassador for Spain at the English court. Juana, known as Juana la Loca, had the most tragic fate. She was married to Philip the Handsome, the heir to the Habsburg lands of the Holy Roman Empire. The marriage was politically brilliant, uniting the vast Spanish and Habsburg inheritances in their son, the future Emperor Charles V. But the marriage was a personal disaster. Philip was unfaithful, and Juana was consumed by a passionate jealousy. After his early death, her grief was so profound that her father and later her son declared her mentally unstable and had her confined to a castle for the rest of her life. The alliance between the sisters was tested by these immense tragedies. When Catherine was facing her great struggle with Henry VE, who wanted to divorce her, she drew strength from the memory of her mother and the support of her family. She wrote to her nephew, the Emperor Charles Vicejuana's son, begging him to defend her cause. Her identity as a Spanish infanta was central to her resistance. The other sisters, though far away, would have followed her struggle with deep concern. Their shared sense of duty, instilled in them by their formidable parents, was the glue that held their alliance together across the miles and through the years of sorrow. They were all cogs in a great machine of dynastic ambition. They paid a high personal price for their parents' vision. Isabella and Maria died in Portugal, fulfilling their duty. Juana was imprisoned for decades. Catherine died in lonely exile in England, refusing to renounce her title as queen. Their story is a stark reminder of the sacrifices demanded of royal women. Their sisterhood was a bond of shared fate, a collective consecration to the cause of Spain that looked very much like a curse. Number 6, can sisters share a crown? In the 19th century German kingdom of Bavaria, King Maximilian I, Joseph had a set of beautiful twin daughters, Elisabeth Ludovica and Amalie Auguste. Born in 1801, They were inseparable from birth. They were part of a larger, close-knit family of sisters, including the future queens of Prussia and Saxony and an Archduchess of Austria. This network of Bavarian sisters would become a powerful liberal and Catholic influence in the Protestant-dominated courts of northern Germany. The core of this network was the deep, lifelong alliance between the twins Elizabeth and Amalie. Their bond was so strong that they were determined not to be separated by marriage. Fortune favored them. Elizabeth was betrothed to the future King Frederick William IV of Prussia, and Amalie was betrothed to Prince John of Saxony, who would also one day become king. The kingdoms of Prussia and Saxony were neighbors, which meant the sisters would be able to visit each other frequently. Their alliance was tested early on. Elizabeth's marriage to the Prussian crown prince was delayed because she refused to convert from Catholicism to the Protestant faith of Prussia. This was a major diplomatic issue. Amalie completely supported her sister's stand. For 3 years, Elizabeth held firm, a remarkable act of religious conviction for a princess in that era. A compromise was eventually reached, and she married into the Prussian royal family, only converting several years later of her own free will. This episode showed the strength of character the sisters shared. Once they were established in their new homes, Elizabeth in Berlin and Amalie in Dresden, their correspondence and frequent visits became the backbone of their alliance. They were now in positions of great influence. Prussia was the rising power in Germany, and Saxony was an important middle-sized kingdom. The sisters used their positions to support each other and to promote their shared interests. Their primary shared project was charity and social welfare. They were both deeply concerned with the plight of the poor. Elizabeth, as Queen of Prussia, was instrumental in founding hospitals, orphanages, and nursing organizations. She was a quiet but effective force for social reform at the conservative Prussian court. Amalie, as Queen of Saxony, did the same in Dresden. She was a patron of numerous charitable institutions. They exchanged ideas and information about their projects, learning from each other's successes and failures. They were partners in philanthropy. They also provided crucial personal support. Both of their husbands were complex, difficult men. Elizabeth's husband, Frederick William IV, was a romantic, artistic, but politically indecisive king who eventually suffered a stroke and was left incapacitated. Elizabeth nursed him with incredible devotion for the last years of his life. During this difficult time, her sister Amalie was her greatest comfort. Amalie's husband, King John, was a scholar who was more interested in translating Dante than in ruling his kingdom. The two queens understood the burdens they each carried. Their alliance, along with that of their other sisters, created a Bavarian mafia at the heart of German politics. They brought a softer, more cultured, and more Catholic sensibility to the stern, militaristic courts of the North. They were patrons of the arts, advocates for the poor, and centers of a more liberal social circle. Their influence was subtle, but pervasive. The story of Elizabeth and Amalie is a testament to the power of a shared identity. They were always the Bavarian twins, even as queens of powerful kingdoms. Their alliance was so complete that it was as if they ruled together, one in Berlin and one in Dresden. They shared a metaphorical crown, working in tandem to bring their shared values to their adopted countries. Their bond shows how sisterly support could be a powerful engine for social good, and a source of incredible personal strength. Number 5, when your sister is your only hope. In 1641, Mary, the Princess Royal of England, was just 9 years old when she was married to the future Prince of Orange, William II. It was a political match designed to secure an alliance between the English Stuarts and the powerful Dutch Republic. A year later, the English Civil War broke out. Mary's father, King Charles I, was at war with his own parliament. For the next decade, Mary, from her new home in The Hague, would be the main foreign agent for the royalist cause. Her closest ally and correspondent in this desperate struggle was her younger sister Elizabeth Stuart, who was trapped in England as a prisoner of Parliament. Mary and Elizabeth had a close and affectionate childhood, but the war separated them physically and placed them on opposite sides of a brutal conflict. Mary was in a position of relative freedom and wealth in the Dutch Republic. Elizabeth, along with her younger brother Henry, was held captive by the parliamentarians, moved from one place of confinement to another. They were political hostages. Their sisterly alliance was maintained through secret, dangerous correspondence. Their letters had to be smuggled past guards and spies. In these letters, they shared news, offered each other comfort, and most importantly, coordinated their efforts to help their father. Mary, in The Hague, worked tirelessly to raise money and support for the royalist army. She pawned her own jewels and used her influence at the Dutch court to try to persuade the government to intervene on her father's behalf. She was a teenage queen running a fundraising and lobbying campaign for foreign war. Elizabeth, from her captivity, acted as a spy and a source of intelligence. She would pass on information about the parliamentarians' plans and moods. She was a brave and intelligent girl who understood the political situation perfectly. She resisted all attempts by Parliament to re-educate her and turn her against her family. Her steadfast loyalty was an inspiration to royalists. Their alliance was a lifeline of hope in a desperate situation. Mary's efforts provided some material support for her father's cause. Elizabeth's letters provided crucial information and a direct link to the captive royal children. The two sisters, one a teenage diplomat in a foreign court, and the other a child prisoner, formed a remarkable team. The story had a tragic ending. Their father, King Charles I, was executed in 1649. The news was devastating for the sisters. Elizabeth's health, already fragile, broke completely. She died in captivity at Carisbrooke Castle a year later at the age of 14. She was found with her head on her Bible, a last gift from her father. Mary's story continued. Her husband died shortly after Elizabeth, leaving her a widow at 19 with a newborn son, the future King William III of England. She spent the next decade fighting for her son's rights in Dutch politics and continuing to support the cause of her exiled brother, the future King Charles II. She played a key role in keeping the Stuart cause alive during the years of the Commonwealth. When the monarchy was restored in 1660, it was a Dutch fleet that escorted her brother back to England. Her work had paid off. The alliance between Mary and Elizabeth is a story of incredible courage and devotion in the face of war and tragedy. It was a partnership forged in crisis. They were not queens who shaped Europe with grand treaties, but two young girls who did everything they could to save their family and their world from falling apart. Their story is a powerful reminder of the personal cost of political conflict and the extraordinary strength that can be found in a sister's love. Number 4. How many daughters does it take to secure a kingdom? King Edward I of England, known as Longshanks, was a formidable warrior and a shrewd politician. He conquered Wales and fought to subdue Scotland. He was also the father of a large family. He had at least 5 daughters who survived to adulthood: Eleanor, Joan, Margaret, Mary, and Elizabeth. In an age when princesses were primarily assets for creating foreign alliances, Edward used his daughters in a strategic and coordinated way to secure his kingdom and expand his influence. The sisters in turn formed a network that strengthened the English crown. Their alliance was one of shared purpose, instilled in them from birth. They were the daughters of a powerful and ambitious king, and they were all expected to play a role in his grand design. Edward arranged strategic marriages for them. Eleanor married the Count of Bar on the border of France. Joan married the powerful Earl of Gloucester, one of England's most important nobles. Margaret married the Duke of Brabant, a key ally in the Low Countries. Elizabeth's marriages connected the crown to Holland and to the great English family of de Bohun. One daughter, Mary, had a different path. She was dedicated to the church by her grandmother, Eleanor of Provence, and became a nun at Amesbury Priory. This was not a retreat from the world. As a royal princess in a prominent religious house, Mary held a position of great influence. She acted as a royal agent within the church, and her priory became a center of royal patronage. The sisters, spread across England and the continent, formed a web of family connections that served the English crown. They maintained contact through letters and messengers. Their courts became outposts of English influence. Margaret, in Brabant, was a particularly important ally for her father. Brabant was a major trading partner of England, and the alliance was crucial for the English wool trade. Margaret and her husband provided diplomatic and sometimes military support for Edward's wars against France. The sisters in England, Joan and Elizabeth, helped to manage the often unruly English nobility. Their marriages brought powerful families closer to the crown. They acted as mediators in disputes and represented their father's interests in their husband's vast territories. They were not just wives, they were royal representatives. Their alliance was also personal. The sisters were clearly fond of each other. Their financial records show them exchanging expensive gifts. When their brother, the future Edward II, was born, the sisters collectively commissioned a magnificent cradle for him. They gathered for family events like weddings and christenings. These were not just family parties, they were demonstrations of Plantagenet family solidarity designed to impress their rivals. Mary, the nun, was a central figure in this personal network. Despite being cloistered, she did not lead a quiet life. She traveled with a large retinue, visited her family at court, and incurred huge gambling debts which her father had to pay. Her sisters often visited her at Amesbury. Her religious life did not cut her off from her family. It gave her a unique position within it. The network of Edward I's daughters was a key part of his statecraft. He used them to build alliances, manage his nobles, and project English power. The sisters, in turn, used their positions to support their father and each other. Their collective story shows how a family of royal women could function as a coordinated political unit. They were not just individual chess pieces, they were a team working together for the security and glory of their father's kingdom. Number 3, could two sisters rule the world? Anne of Austria and her younger sister Maria Anna of Spain were born at the absolute center of global power. They Spanish infantas, daughters of King Philip III of Spain. In the early 17th century, the Spanish Habsburgs were the most powerful dynasty in the world, ruling Spain, Portugal, parts of Italy, the Netherlands, and a vast empire in the Americas. The sisters were raised to believe in their family's divine right to rule and their duty to preserve Habsburg power. Their destiny was to be the human links in the great Habsburg family alliance. Anne was married to King Louis of France. Maria Anna was married to her cousin Ferdinand III, the Holy Roman Emperor. They were now the queens of the two most important Catholic powers on the continent, besides Spain itself. One was in Paris, the other in Vienna. Their purpose was to ensure that France and the Holy Roman Empire remained allied to their home country, Spain. Their sisterly alliance was supposed to be the bedrock of European politics. They wrote to each other constantly. Their letters were a mix of personal news and highly sensitive political information. They were, in effect, ambassadors for their family's interests at their husbands' courts. However, their mission became incredibly complicated. The chief minister of France, Cardinal Richelieu, was determined to break the Habsburg encirclement of France. He saw Queen Anne's loyalty to Spain as a threat to his foreign policy. Anne's position in France was very difficult. She was a Spanish woman in a French court that was increasingly hostile to Spain. She was suspected of being a spy for her brother, King Philip IV of Spain. Richelieu's agents watched her every move and intercepted her letters. On several occasions, she was caught in clandestine correspondence with her brother. She was publicly humiliated and threatened with being repudiated. Through all this, her secret communication with her sister, Maria Anna, in Vienna, was a source of comfort and strategic support. There were two Habsburg women trying to survive and operate in foreign courts. Their alliance had its greatest impact after their husbands died. Both sisters, remarkably, became regents for their young sons. Anne of Austria was regent for her son, the future Sun King, Louis XIV of France. Maria Anna was a key advisor to her son, Emperor Leopold I. For a brief period, these two sisters held the reins of power in Paris and Vienna. However, their loyalties were now divided. Anne, as regent of France, was forced to preside over a war against her own home country, Spain. This was the final stage of the 30 Years' War. She had to choose between her duty to her son and her loyalty to her brother. She chose her son. She supported her chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin, in his anti-Spanish policy. This must have been a personal agony for her. The relationship with her sister, Maria Anna, must have been incredibly strained during this period. They were on opposite sides of a major European war, and yet the family bond remained. They were still Habsburgs. Their correspondence, though now the letters of political rivals, likely continued. They would have understood the impossible position each was in. The story of Anne and Maria. Anna is a fascinating and complex example of a sisterly alliance tested by the brutal realities of international politics. They were raised to be partners in a grand dynastic project. For a time they were, but ultimately their duties as queens and regents of their adopted countries forced them into conflict. Their lives show the inherent contradiction faced by many royal women. They were sent abroad to represent their birth family, but to succeed, they had to become loyal to their new family and country. The two sisters, who could have ruled the world together, were instead forced to rule against each other. Number 2. How do you invent a country? In 1832, a new country appeared on the map of Europe, Belgium. It had broken away from the Netherlands, and the great powers of Europe decided it should be a neutral kingdom. They needed a king. They chose a German prince, Leopold of Saxe-Coburg. He was a widower, his first wife having been the heir to the British throne. To secure his new kingdom, Leopold needed a prestigious wife. He chose Louise of Orleans, the eldest daughter of King Louis-Philippe I of France. This marriage was the cornerstone of the new Belgian state, tying it to its powerful French neighbor. Louise arrived in Brussels as a young, shy, and deeply religious queen. Her new country was fragile. Her husband, King Leopold I, was often grim and preoccupied with the immense task of building a nation from scratch. Louise's greatest support in these early difficult years was her younger sister, Marie of Orleans. The alliance between Louise and Marie was one of deep personal affection and shared artistic sensibility. They were both talented artists. Louise was a skilled painter and musician. Marie was a gifted sculptor, most famous for her statue of Joan of Arc. Their letters are filled with discussions of art, literature, and music. This shared cultural world was a refuge from the stiff and demanding world of politics. Marie was Louise's emotional anchor. The Belgian court was new and had little of the glamour of the French court where the sisters had grown up. Louise was often lonely and homesick. Marie's letters and frequent visits were a lifeline. She would bring a piece of home to Brussels, reminding Louise of the family she had left behind. But their alliance was more than just personal. It had a quiet political importance. Queen Louise was the essential link between Belgium and France. Her good relationship with her father, the French king, helped to guarantee France's support for Belgian independence. Marie, back in Paris, was Louise's advocate at the French court. She ensured that her sister's interests, and by extension Belgium's interests, were always represented. And Marie also played a role in helping Louise adapt to her new role as queen. Marie had a stronger, more confident personality. She encouraged Louise to overcome her shyness and to engage with the Belgian people. Together, they helped to shape the character of the new Belgian monarchy. They promoted a model of a modest, hard-working bourgeois monarchy that was in tune with the spirit of the 19th century. They established charities and patronized Belgian artists, helping to foster a new sense of national identity. Tragically, their alliance was cut short. Marie died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. Her death was a devastating blow to Louise and the entire Orleans family. Louise wrote that a part of her had died with her sister. She kept Marie's memory alive, displaying her artwork in the royal palaces and speaking of her often. Even after Marie's death, her influence endured. The model of queenship that she and Louise had developed together continued to shape the Belgian monarchy. Louise, though she always remained a reserved figure, grew into a respected and beloved queen. She raised her children, including the future King Leopold II, to have a strong sense of public duty. The story of Louise and Marie of Orleans is a gentle, intimate one. It is not about grand strategy or high politics. It is about how the love and support between two sisters helped to give a human face to a brand new nation. Their alliance provided the emotional strength that a young queen needed to play her part in the invention of a country. Number 1. What happens when a queen and an empress join forces? Hedwig Eleonora of Holstein-Gottorp was one of the most powerful women in 17th century Swedish history. She was married to King Charles I of Sweden, and after his early death, she served as regent for her son, King Charles XI. Her regency lasted for many years, and she remained the dominant figure at the Swedish court for the rest of her long life, a true queen mother who oversaw the rise of Sweden as a great northern European power. Her strength came not just from her own political skill, but from a powerful alliance with her two sisters, Christina Magdalene and Marie Eleanor. The three sisters were from a small but strategic German duchy, Holstein-Gottorp. Their family had a policy of making advantageous marriages, and Christina Magdalene married the Margrave of Baden-Durlach, Marie Eleanor married the Landgrave of Hesse-Eschwege, and Hedwig Eleonora made the most brilliant match of all, marrying the King of Sweden. Their separation by marriage did not break their bond. It transformed it into a political network. The three sisters, now in positions of influence in Sweden and two important German states, coordinated their actions to support each other and their shared family interests. Their primary goal was to advance the interests of their birth family, the House of Holstein-Gottorp, and to maintain a network of pro-Swedish states in Germany. Hedwig Eleonora was the center of this network. As queen and then regent of Sweden, she was in the most powerful position. She used Swedish influence to protect and promote her sister's territories. For example, she ensured that her brother, the Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, was supported by Sweden in his constant struggles with his powerful neighbor Denmark. Her sisters, in return, acted as her agents in Germany. Their courts became listening posts for Swedish diplomacy. They gathered intelligence, fostered pro-Swedish sentiment among the German princes, and provided a reliable channel of communication. During the many wars of the period, this family network was more trustworthy and often more efficient than the official diplomatic service. Their alliance was particularly important during Hedwig Eleonora's long regency. As a female ruler, she faced opposition from the powerful Swedish nobility. Her sisters provided her with crucial external support. Their husbands, influenced by their wives, became reliable allies of Sweden. This German support helped to stabilize Hedwig Eleonora's position at home. The sisters' correspondence was the lifeblood of their alliance. They would have written constantly, sharing news about their children, court gossip, and, most importantly, political information and advice. A letter from Christina Magdalene might contain a warning about the military plans of a rival German prince. A letter from Marie Eleanor might contain advice on how to handle a difficult member of the Swedish Council. This sisterly partnership had a lasting impact on the political map of Northern Europe. It helped to cement Sweden's position as a great power. It ensured the survival and influence of the House of Holstein-Gottorp, which would go on to produce future kings of Sweden and even a Tsar of Russia. The story of Hedwig Eleonora and her sisters is a prime example of dynastic feminism. These women were not passive objects of exchange. They were active political players who used the power they gained through marriage to form a cohesive and effective political bloc. Their alliance shows how a family of well-married sisters could operate as a powerful international network. Their personal bonds of affection translated directly into political power that shaped the destiny of nations.